Check, check, 1, 2. Check test 1, 2.
his last year, I wouldn't wish on anybody.
That bad, huh?
It's like being in a concentration camp. He had the asbestos cancer.
Did he really? Wait, how'd he get that? He's a young guy. He's not an old guy, right?
66.
Oh. Well. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat. Hi, Bob. How are you? It's great to see you. Good morning. I have about a half a voice, so we'll do the best we can. So it's good to see everybody. Shabbat Shalom. You are hereby designated the hardcore. You came out on a morning like this, in the rain and the snow and the sleet and the hail. Well, it's, every 6 months it rains in LA. So thank you for coming. I'm really impressed because the streets are kind of treacherous and the freeways are all closed and, the world's going a little nuts. So thank you for coming out. Shabbat Shalom. We wish everybody a good Shabbos. And welcome Rabbi Gelman back from his journeys.
I went to Florida.
Yeah.
They now give you a white belt and white shoes at the airport.
Yeah.
They don't want you wandering around and not looking like you fit in.
Yeah.
And I got a pair of pants.
Yeah.
That buckle up around my puppet.
Yeah, right.
I got that.
And you get a coupon to go to Denny's at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
I said, "Where's the Rascal House?"
Have meatloaf. Oh, is this still there?
No, everything's gone.
Wolfie's is closed?
Collins Avenue has just Russian billionaires.
No.
That's all that's there.
Well, the Rascal House, that was there forever. That was Wolfie's, Did real seriously? The Rascal House was the famous sort of Jewish deli in the neighborhood. That was fun, and it was.
And you'd put rolls in your purse.
Yeah. Oh my God, Baruch Diana Mess.
It's
All right.
It's an amazing town now.
Miami.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Miami.
Yeah. It's not just Miami. It's like everything from like
Whatever nation it's in.
Fort Lauderdale.
It's not America, but whatever it is.
You can speak Spanish or Yiddish, but you can't speak English, right? Or Russian, right? What?
English, Russian, every
Really? Seriously?
but English.
But not English. All right, fair enough. Well, welcome back. We're glad you're here. Pop, good to see Pop. Glad you're here. Bob, welcome back from your job. Anyway, welcome to everybody. A couple of announcements. So it's a very quiet morning at VBS following, don't tell anybody, but following Torah study, there's just services. No bar mitzvah, no weddings, just daven until 11:30, go home. So if you'd like to come and pray with us, there's a nice little lunch afterwards. The Parsha group, is the Parsha group meeting today? Paul, who's leading it? You going to lead it? Who's leading it? Judy's in Israel already. Yeah, so a bunch of us are going to Israel. I'll be leaving on Monday night. We will have Torah study next week. Rabbi Farkas will be here to lead it. He's been practicing hard. I heard that Hoffman was good when he was here. I heard good reviews. So Farkas will be here for me next week, and I'll be back the following week. I'll be sleepy, but I'll be back. So please come back next week. It's a very quiet week in the shul because we're all away. So a lot of people are going to APAC on Saturday night. The big APAC policy conference is in Washington on Monday and Tuesday, or Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Anybody going to APAC? So it's a nice experience. You can get it online now. You can watch it on C-SPAN or online. And the vice president is supposed to be coming, and if he's still in office by Monday. And Nikki Haley, who is what?
He could be president by then.
Yeah, or well, God only knows. No. Well, we think not, but then with him, you never know. I mean, he could come, he could send Mueller. We'll see what happens. So we don't know. We really don't know what's going to happen. On Friday night, there's a Rimonim, which is a beautiful musical service. Next Shabbos, of course, will be Torah study. I'll be back on Thursday, the 15th. So I'm going to wish everybody a really good. And Friday night, this following night, 16th, Cantor Barron is doing the next edition of his Farbrengen. He's done a series of these where he's done a night of Jewish folk music, but not Jewish folk music by Jews. So Paul Simon, Phil Oakes, Alan Sherman. Well, he's not doing Alan Sherman. This is more serious stuff. But Paul Simon, Phil Oakes, yeah, they're all Jewish. They're all the protest songs. Peter Yarrow, all the protest songs are written by Jews. So you're all welcome to come. That's the 16th. It's 2 weeks from yesterday, a week from this coming Friday night. Okay? Is that fair? Good. So this morning we're back in the book of Shemot, and which we haven't been in a while. And people come to Purim. Were you at Purim? We had a lovely time. I don't know if you were here, but the rabbis and I, we had such a good time. Like we forgot we were in shul and had just started goofing for each other, and we had a really nice time. So if you want to watch it, it's online now. I had an interesting moment. I'll just tell you about an interesting rabbi moment. You hear okay?
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat. Good. Good to see you. An interesting rabbi moment this week. So, one of the things that rabbis do is we counsel people, and I had a couple come to visit, a really lovely couple, who apparently I married 5 years ago. I don't remember, but they tell me I married them. They look familiar. And they're having a lot of trouble. Because they're both living very, very demanding lives. They have kids and careers and demands and family issues. And there's a lot of tension between the two of them. And they come into they sat down with me, and I said to them, have you gotten counseling? They said, we've done that before. We don't seem to make any progress. So maybe you can help us. And I said, but I'm not a counselor. I'm not a good counselor because I tend to talk too much, Counselor's supposed to sit there for an hour going, I can't do that, But I started. I said to each one of them, tell me what happened, tell me what's happening. And each one of them tells me a story. And it's amazing how similar this story is. Basically, we love each other, we cared for each other, we went into this marriage, and things got a little more difficult. Children arrived, and career stuff, and family stuff. And I don't think I'm getting out of this marriage what I need to get out of the marriage. He or she makes nothing but demands on me all the time. I don't have the strength, the energy. And I'm listening to both of them talk, and at a certain point, I got really frustrated. This is why I'm not a marriage counselor. Because a marriage counselor would stretch them out for 3-4 sessions before getting to this point. And I stopped them about 30 minutes into the conversation. I said, all right, enough. I said, here's the problem. You think marriage is about what you can take. It's not, you get stuff out of marriage, it's no question, but it's also about what you give. And there doesn't seem to be any giving in this marriage. All you talk about is what you're not being able to take. And well, it's not me. See, I don't blame them for this because they're under a lot of stress. Everybody gets married, and when you're married, things are joyful. It's all flowers and candy, right? But the moment you start adding children, which means you're sleep deprived, and there's a financial stress, and so you're working harder to make the money to support the kids that now you don't have time to be with, and you add one stressor on top of the other, and what happens is you're needy. You become emotionally needy, and you go to the other partner, and you want from the other partner, and the other partner is just as emotionally needy, and you end up with this kind of a break. So at a certain point, I stopped, and I said, stop. Tell me what you give to each other. And there was this moment of like 30 seconds of silence. Like when you've just said the one thing that, and like, gee, no one's ever asked us that question, right? So I said, well, come on, let's talk that for a moment. And slowly they began to rethink. So I sent them home with an assignment. I want you to try to figure out what you owe to each other. And if you want to stay married to each other, but what you have to give to each other. And slowly they began to rethink this. That's what, the reason I tell you that isn't because I'm such a great man. I'm not. I'm a terrible marriage counselor. But in the Torah portion this morning, we're going to see the same thing. There's a moment of change of personality in the middle of this Torah portion, which is just remarkable. When you see it, you'll say, wow, look at the way the whole focus changes. So let's remember what this book is. The book is the second book of the Torah called Shemot, which literally means names, because it's a book about identity. The first half of the book is about our identity, about the identity of this people, right? We talk about the two principal events that shape the personality of this people, okay? The exodus from Egypt and the arrival at the covenant of Mount Sinai. Who are we as a Jewish people? We're a covenanted people that were slaves in Egypt. That's who we are. It turns out that the end of the book, the last several parshiot, the last several weeks that we read the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus, is about God's personality. And the question that you're going to see in the Torah portion, which is extraordinary, is this question, who are you, God? Who is this God? What does it mean to have this God in your life? What is the orientation of this God toward the world? And whatever that question means to you, it means something different to each of us. And you'll see the Torah acknowledges that. Because when you say this particular quality or set of qualities is divinity, is God, what you're doing is placing a claim on yourself. That means that has to be the highest aspiration of human ideals. What does it mean to say God is merciful? It means you have to become a forgiving person. What does it mean to say God is kind? It means kindness, what you're saying is that kindness is the core sort of theme of the world, and you have to plug yourself into it. It's actually a very powerful ethical statement as well as being a powerful metaphysical or theological statement. And that's what we're going to see negotiated in today's Torah portion. So open with me, it's Tisa, which is on page 523. And the story that, of course, we're going to read is the golden calf event, which you'll find on page 529. 529. Everybody here? Chapter 32 of the book of Exodus. Got a chumash? Everybody got a chumash? You'll need a chumash today because it's... Bob, you want a book? Is that okay? I'm good. Okay, please. You want to get a few more, David? All right, thank you, David. Okay, I'll read it, so if you don't have one, you can listen to you can follow, okay? So when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, okay, the people gathered against Aaron. The Hebrew is al Aharon, which means on top of him. So the translator uses the word against. You would imagine they'd gather in front of him, but no. They gathered, it's sort of, we use in English, we use the phrase, ganged up on, right. That's sort of the phrase of it, right. And said to him, come make us a God who'll go before us, for that man Moses who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him. Guy goes up a quaking mountain, he's 40 days gone, the mountain's quaking, he's 80 years old, he ain't coming back. And here we are stuck in the desert. We need something, a visible symbol, we need something visible to lead us, to be at the front of us. And there's an unclarity here about exactly what they're asking for. Are they asking for a God, a physical God? Are they asking for a representation of a God? It's not exactly clear, and you'll see that as the story goes on, which is exactly the question of what idolatry really is. We don't know what's happened to this guy, right? Aaron said to them, take off the gold rings that are in the ears of your wives, sons, and daughters, and bring them to me. Okay? Oh, thank you, Dave. Thanks. Here's a chumash for anybody who needs one. Okay? Thank you, David. All right, so this tells you two things. First of all, that Jewish boys wore earrings back then, too. So if your son or grandson or nephew wants to wear an earring, let him. And number two, the Midrash right away notices that Aaron says to the women of the community, give me your jewelry, and because he never thought they would do it, you know. Thank God they don't do it anymore now, okay? So, give me your jewelry. They give him all the jewels. The people took off the gold rings, brought them to him. He took them from them, cast it in a mold, and made a molten calf. Molten means it was you don't make a solid gold thing, that's too heavy. You make a frame like a piece of wood, and then you hammer gold leaf to it. That's what it is. Yeah, that's what it is. Because otherwise, you couldn't lift a golden calf, right? I mean, if you made this, unless it was tiny, but if it was big enough to see, it would weigh, 1,000 pounds, right? Okay? Now, listen to the two statements, because the two statements are critical. They exclaimed, who's they? The people. The people said, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And Aaron says, tomorrow shall be a festival to the Lord. Do you see the difference between the two statements? Right? Aaron says, this isn't God. This is simply a place where we can come and recognize God. This is a religious institution. And what's interesting about that statement, and this isn't God, but we can imagine, as it were, God resting above this. We know, by the way, from archaeology, that the symbol of a calf, right? The Babylonian emperor sat on a throne, and his footstool was a calf. That is, there was an icon of a calf with a little shelf on it, and he put his feet on it. This was well known in the ancient world. So the notion that what you're looking at a golden calf is not God, but God is above it and can't be seen. That's the idea. That's what Aaron was thinking. Okay? What are the people thinking? That's God. This object has some sort of power. This object is invested with some sort of magical electricity, some kind of magical power. And so what you have in the, Papa, 1 second. What you have here is a contrast between two ideas, okay? And this is a great sermon, which one of us will give one day soon, which is that the notion of idolatry is when you take the symbol and mistake the symbol for the thing it's supposed to symbolize. Like the symbol doesn't have any real power, but when you invest the symbol with all this sanctity, and it becomes so sacred, and you forget that it's supposed to symbolize something else, right? You fetishize the symbol is what is the language, right? And suddenly the symbol becomes more valuable to you than the thing it's supposed to point to. That's the technical definition of idolatry, right? I'll give you just one interesting political example of this, right? There was a great debate between Theodor Herzl, the founder of political Zionism, and Achad Ha'am, Asher Tzvi Ginsburg, who was an essayist who wrote under the name Achad Ha'am, who was a great cultural Zionist. Herzl said, the Jewish people need a country. We need a country to protect ourselves from the anti-Semitism of the world. Happened to be right. Achad Ha'am said, be careful. Because, you know, when people get countries, they worship the country. And they worship the country's power. And they worship generals who have stars on their shoulders and airplanes with insignias on their tails. And they forget what the country was founded to do. You fetishize the object instead of the thing it represents, the thing it stands for. You see? Now, symbols need to be respected, no question. But the question is, what is more sacred, the symbol or what it points to? And in this case, you have the notion where the symbol itself becomes the object of worship, right? Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, says it's like a hungry person walking into a restaurant and trying to eat the menu. You forget that it represents something, you see? It's supposed to point to something, and that's the definition, one of the definitions of idolatry. Pop.
You have the same thing here when the Torah comes down the aisle. You have some people grabbing it and kissing it as if that had the power to do it.
Right.
And not just giving honor to it.
Right. So I told you this story last year, I think. They teach you in rabbi school you should never preach when you're angry because you'll say something hurtful. This is a true thing. I got mad once because I was watching that. And I saw a little lady, an older woman of our congregation, knocked over by people who were reaching for the Torah. So when the Torah came back, I said to the congregation, I shouldn't have done this, but I did it. I'll confess. I said to them, how many of you just reached out to kiss the Torah? Everybody's hands go up. Good. Come in. Welcome. I said to the congregation, how many of you read Hebrew? Fewer hands went up. I said, how many of you understand what you're reading in Hebrew? We have this bizarre idea that if you can read phonetically, you read Hebrew. I can read French, but I don't understand a word except fromage. I mean, that's it. You know, ballet maybe, but that's it. How many of you understand the Hebrew you read? Fewer hands went up. I said, how many of you can read the Chumash, the Bible in Hebrew and understand what it says? Very few hands went up. And then I said what I shouldn't have said, which is, if you're reaching to kiss the Torah and you can't read it, you're committing an act of idolatry. What is it? What are you kissing? You're kissing a velvet cover, a parchment book, ink and paper? What is that? That's not holy. What's holy is what it says. What's holy is what it points to. The object itself is not holy, right? Now, I shouldn't have said that, because the object itself deserves reverence. It's true. But there is a certain strangeness to, right? The debate that we've had in America this last year. If you feel that America has betrayed a certain class of its citizens and you decide to kneel during the national anthem, have you committed an act of sacrilege? Well, the flag should be respected, it's true. But the flag is only a symbol of a greater ideal of liberty and justice for all. And if you don't believe that the country is living up to the ideals of liberty and justice for all, to respect the object and the song without respecting the ideal is an act of fetishized idolatry, right? Colin Kaepernick is not a very smart guy, by the way. He's a decent quarterback, but not. He's a very simple-minded guy. He said, we violated the ideals that the object stands for. How can you stand for the object? You see? I mean, and he got, castigated because there's patriots in the country who believe that but it's a very interesting question. I mean, he raised the question. By the way, when Irving Berlin wrote the song, the original song was not "You're a grand old flag." The original words were, "You're a grand old rag." He was making fun, or he was poking fun at people who idealized nationalism and patriotism at the expense of people in the country who were suffering. And then when the First World War started, he changed the words to "You're a grand old flag," because it became patriotic to be for the country in a war. But so this is the same idea. What does the symbol stand for? If you fetishize the object without observing the ideals of the, right? Observing the ideals that the object stands for, then you've committed a strange act. Please.
Yeah, but Rabbi, because we can't reach out and touch God.
Good question.
Don't we need these symbols?
Yes, and symbols should be, and there should be a degree of reverence for the symbol. But at what point does it become worship of the symbol and not worship of God, or worship of the ideal that it stands for? That's the great question. Right? So here you have the Bible pointing this out, because the difference between Aaron's statement and the people's statement is very clear. Right? Now, what's interesting here as well, we won't get into this in too much depth, is the place of this particular Torah portion. Okay? If you look at the table of contents, which we won't do right now, this Torah portion is stuck in the middle of the narrative that tells about the building of the Mishkan. Right? You have two Torah portions, Truma and Tisa, the last 2 weeks we've read, where God gives explicit and articulate instructions, meticulous instructions about how the Mishkan, the shrine, should be built. The shrine is a tent, and it has a big fence around it. And in the tent, there's a front room and a back room. And in the back, there's the Ark of the Covenant. That's the one that Harrison Ford found in a movie, right? And the Ark of the Covenant is a golden box. And on the golden box are two kruvim, angel statues. We talk about making golden statues to represent God, right? That's the Mishkan. Sorry? Yeah, the Oscar, right. Right. That's tomorrow night. Maybe they'll get it right this year and announce the winner instead of the second. Apparently they're doing it, the same two people, it's Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty are doing it again. Because like, this time you'll get it right, idiot. Yeah, no, or it's going to be printed in very big, print. Hey, idiot, the winner is. Right. But you see that. So this narrative is smack in the middle. You have Truma and Tetzaveh, which tell God's instructions for the building of Mishkan. And then in the next 2 weeks, we're going to read Vayakel and Pekudei, which is the story of how Moses did it exactly as God says it. So you have 4 Torah portions which discuss the creation of the shrine. And smack in the middle is this narrative. Now, if you read it in the middle where it is, it's a very interesting commentary on religious institutions. It says exactly this: religions need symbols. People need symbols to capture and express their ideals, their religious visions. But don't mistake the symbol for the ideal. This becomes a commentary and a critique, a criticism, smack in the middle of that narrative, to remind you that the object is not God. The object points to something. That's exactly what this is for, right? Jerry?
And I think the wording suggests a much, even further, a deeper theological issue.
Yeah.
And that is, they're not using the same words. The people talk about Elohim.
Right, and God, and
Aaron talks about Adonai.
right, which means what? So,
Which means that that issue hasn't been resolved. I think the writer is saying that issue hasn't been resolved yet.
right,
This monotheism isn't something like a light switch. You turn it on, you have the revelation, even at Sinai,
Right.
that's it.
Right.
Everything else is erased.
right.
So I think this is a live issue in the fact that it's in the middle of building the Mishkan says, yes, you're building something, but what for?
Right, exactly.
Right.
For whom, for, what for? Now, it's interesting, by the way, Rashi was the great medieval commentator. Following the rabbis, offers the idea that it's based on a Talmudic idea that ein muchar v'muktam b'Torah, that the Torah is not chronological. Rashi offers the idea that this narrative, the event of the golden calf, took place before God gave the commandment to build the Mishkan. So that what God learned through the experience of the golden calf is what you just said a moment ago: is people need tangible symbols. That's one way to read it. The fact that it's in the middle of the narrative, which means the Torah's editors put it there, is their idea that, but they'll say, don't mistake the symbol for the object. That's the danger of religious symbols. Now, let's see what happens. Everybody together? We all here? When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, said, tomorrow's the day of the Lord. Early the next day, the people offered up burnt offerings and brought sacrifices of well-being. They sat down to eat and drink and rose up to dance. Now, the rose up to dance is really interesting. If you look at the verse in Hebrew, and if anybody can read Hebrew with me, you should. Vayashkuma b'macharat v'ya'alu olot v'yigishu shlamim. They brought sacrifices, shlamim. Vayeshev ha'am le'echol v'shatu. They sat down to eat, which is what you do at a sacrifice. V'shatu, they drank. The next two words are so interesting. It's not enough that they ate and drank. All through the sacrificial worship, you eat and drink. You eat and drink sacrifices, right? It's the next two words which are really strange, right? Vayakumu litzachek. Litzachek. Litzachek is a really interesting word. It's one of these words that keeps popping up back in the narrative in strange places, right? First of all, it's the name of the second patriarch, Yitzchak, my namesake, right? Then it says Ishmael. Remember Ishmael, the brother? He was kicked out of the household. Why? Because he was mitzacheking with his brother. Right? Then Mrs. Potiphar. Remember Mrs. Potiphar? The seductive cougar lady who tried to get Joseph, right? Here's to you, Mrs. Potiphar. Right? Pharaoh loves you more than you will know. No, whoa, whoa. It says, what did she want to do to Joseph? Litzachek. Litzachek. So it says here, rise up to dance. It's more than dancing. It's what? Yeah, it's like that joke about mixed dancing, you know. It's a strange, it's something lascivious. It's something sexual. It's something out of control. There's a sort of physicality gone wild. A frat party. I mean, it's the Mardi Gras. There's something wrong here, right? Anyway, what happens? In the movies, the screen would now say, meanwhile, at the top of the mountain, right? The Lord spoke to Moses. Like, on the top of the mountain, so on the bottom of the mountain, you have this wild frat party going on. And the top of the mountain, there's this pristine silence of moral clarity. And in the pristine silence of moral clarity, the Lord spoke to Moses, hurry down, for your people who you brought out of Egypt have acted basely. Every parent who's ever taken children on a car ride and turned to your partner and said, your kids are fighting in the back seat, right? They've quickly turned aside from the way I enjoined them. They've made themselves a molten calf, bowed down to it, and said, this is your God. So that's the first thing he says. Now listen to what God says. The Lord further said to Moses, I see this as a stiff-necked people. What do you mean stiff-necked? I mean, what do they mean? Stubborn in what way? They say that again, Ben. They don't change. I'm trying to grow them. I'm trying to raise them. I'm trying to shape them. They won't be shaped. This people won't be shaped. What the hell is wrong with you people? Look at how much look at God saying, look how much I've invested in this people, right? I did this whole light show in Egypt, 10 plagues, right? I brought them out of Egypt. We crossed the Red Sea, for God's sakes, right? I give them manna to eat in the desert. I bring them to Mount Sinai. The mountain quakes. I speak to them face to face. You'd imagine that somewhere along the way they've changed, right? Somewhere along the way. But as soon as you turn your back, bam, they're back to being the same schleppers they were before. Like, this is like every parent of a teenager who says, like, what's it going to take? Yeah, I gave you the car. I gave you the car keys. What's it going to take? This is the frustrated parent. You hear the frustrated parent? This is a stiff-necked people. Now the next phrase is, let me be that my anger may blaze forth against them, and I'll destroy them, and I'll make of you a great people. What does God want to do? Start over. Say again? Start over. Have you ever seen this pattern before in the Bible? Where did you see it? Noah. It's the Noah story all over again, right? I screwed up. This people ain't going to do it. I'll kill them all, and I'll start with you. You, Moses. You'll have a few kids. They'll have a few kids. I'll have a few kids. Inside of 1,000 years, there'll be a people there. I'm not in a hurry, right? Right? Start over again. I burnt the cake. I throw it out, and I make another one. Anyone ever do that when you're cooking? Right? Now, but look at the phrase. The phrase is so interesting. The phrase in Hebrew is hanichali, which means back off and let me do this, or let me do it. It's a more formal thing. It's like, if it please. You know how a lawyer will say, if it please the court, before the lawyer approaches the bench, right? Moses takes the hanichali, let me be, or the if it please the court. He takes that seriously. And Moses implored the Lord, let not your anger, O Lord, blaze forth against your people. Don't do it. Don't do it, right? Whom you delivered out of the land of Egypt, right? With great power. Let not the Egyptians say it was an evil intent that he delivered them to kill them off in the mountains and annihilate them from the face of the earth. So the first reason you shouldn't do this is why? What will the goyim say, right? Right? You're airing our dirty laundry in public. You really want the front page of the New York Times to say, right? Mueller charges Lord with manslaughter. I mean, is that really what you want the front page of the New York Times to say? Right? Turn from your anger, your blazing anger, renounce the plan to punish your people. And now he gives second claim. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Right? Second argument is you have a covenant with their ancestors, and you love their ancestors. They still have that in them. Don't give up on these people. How you swore to yourself and said to them, I'll make your offspring numerous. And God says, all right, fine. I'll calm down, right? Thereupon Moses turned and he goes down the mountain, right? Now here's what happens. He comes down the mountain, and as he gets close, you all know the story. He smashes the tablets. We could spend some time on that. He confronts his brother, says to his brother, what did they do to you that this happened to you? And his brother tells him a story, right? If you turn to page 534, it's one of the funniest scenes. Sad, but funny. Moses says to Aaron, what did this people do to you? Aaron says, don't be angry. You know them. You know this people is bent on evil. You know they're bent on evil, right? You know their character. They said, make us a god to lead us. For that man Moses has brought us out. We don't know what happened. So I said, whoever has gold, take it off. They gave it to me. I hurled it into the fire, and poof, out came this calf. I love that. Moses saw out of control they were. And by the way, the Hebrew is interesting. Vayar Moshe et ha'am ki parua hu. Parua means out of control. But it's the same letters as the word Pharaoh. It's the same letter as the word Pharaoh, right? So you know what? There's something bad in this people. There's something evil. One second. So what happens is he punishes the people. The people, he yells at the people, right? And God says to them, right? Right? Page 536. Verse 31. Moses went back to the Lord and said, this people is guilty of a great sin in making a god of gold. Now, if you will forgive their sin, well and good. But if not, erase me from the record which you have written. So what does Moses say to God? I mean, what did God want to do? God wanted to destroy the people, make a people out of Moses. Moses says, if you're going to destroy this people, kill me first. Suicide by God. Right? There's this thing called suicide by cop, right? So he says, kill me first. Because I'm not going a step, right? Unless you forgive us, I'm not going. God says, I'll punish those who sinned against me. Now, what's the next section, right? I'm sorry, go ahead. Which question?
Moses already knew what they were doing down there.
He heard about it. We hadn't seen it yet.
Yeah, but God told him.
Yeah, right.
So why did he smash the tablet?
That's a good question. Why did he smash the tablets?
He already knew that.
So why did he smash the tablets? So tell me why.
You don't deserve it.
You ever hear your kids fighting in the next room? And you know they're fighting in the next room, but when you walk in the room, what you see still shocks you? So that's one idea. Give me another reason, Adele.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Hearing it and seeing it's
Two different things. Hearing about it and seeing, that's a whole different thing, right? Yes. Yeah, no kidding. Get their attention, right? You know, there's an old joke about an elephant with a 2x4. You know, it's just, bam! You know, now you'll pay attention. But remember, these are tablets given to him by God. I mean, these are rather valuable objects. What else could he have been thinking? Go ahead.
More than giving their attention, it's the destruction.
Yeah.
You want the covenant, this is a reflection of the covenant, and you broke it, and I'm breaking it, but this is a symbol of I'm terminating it.
Right, so it's the opposite of what we talked about before. You have violated the terms of the covenant. You do not deserve the physical representation of the covenant. Right? I'm not giving you the symbol because you don't understand the concept. Right? Or let's go one more step. If you're worried about a people that are worshiping objects, what object in the world is more worthy of your worship than something that God himself made? If I give you these tablets, you'll bow down to the damn tablets. You can't, you're not ready for symbols because you don't get the idea that this isn't a God who's physical. You'll start worshiping these damn tablets. You'll use your religion to hurt people. You'll beat each other with these tablets. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. Right? Right? Go ahead, Ron. It's a fit of temper, but in some ways I think it's even more than that. I think he's worried about, it's all a meditation on the power and misuse of symbols. You see? Yeah, go ahead. Rabbi Gelman is back, which is just,
So this is all good.
I could be right for 2 weeks in a row, and now he's back.
I think your interpretation.
A breath of correction. Go ahead.
Fresh air. I think.
Yeah, yes, I think.
Certainly air, whether it's fresh or not. Moses broke the tablets because God needed Moses and the people to have broken tablets. And the reason God needed the people to have a set of broken tablets along with a set of whole tablets is that is the nature of people, and that is the nature of the law. If God had just given a perfect set of tablets, and they were put in a perfect Mishkan, and they were put in a perfect temple, the whole idea would be that you can do this.
Perfection is
You can
is
achieve
accessible.
this.
Yeah.
You can do the law. But what God finally learned, what Moses finally learned, is that people are broken and whole. And so the proof of this is that when the Mishkan is done, and they put the whole tablets in the ark,
The second set.
the second whole tablets,
Right.
Moses is also commanded to pick up every single piece of the broken tablets, first tablets,
Mm-hmm.
and put them in the same ark.
Okay.
And the rabbis, when they're, of course, when they comment on that, they say, Luchot v'shivrei luchot, shneim munachim ba'aron.
Right.
Both the broken and the whole were together in the same ark. And that idea that in the law that God gives us, in the life that God gives us, there is a combination of brokenness and wholeness. And that we need to understand that God accepts both of them in the same ark.
Okay.
The man who began the Americans for Disabilities Act was a friend of mine, Henry Viscardi, and Hank said to me one day at lunch, he said, you know, Mark, no one is disabled. I said, really? He said, no. There are some people who are temporarily abled. Temporarily abled. And from that moment on, I have felt myself to be only temporarily able.
Mm-hmm.
One day on our show, I interviewed Billy Graham, and I want to lift up his name in this way. And I spoke to him about the tapes, the Nixon tapes. In 1972, privately, not on air, I spoke to him about it. In 72, he's sitting with Nixon talking about Jews. And he's saying anti-Semitic things about Jews.
Nixon.
And in 2002, the tapes were revealed.
Mm-hmm.
And I interviewed him after that. And I said, how did you deal with this? He said, I gathered Jewish leaders. First, I didn't think I said it. I wouldn't have believed I said it unless I heard it. But I obviously said it. And he said, Rabbi, this is the result of the ugly part of my childhood.
Huh.
I grew up, I was born in 1918 in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And people thought that way about Jews. He said, I called Jewish leaders together, and I said I would crawl to you on the floor to apologize for what I said. And at that moment, I understood Luchot v'shivrei luchot better than I had understood it from any Jew. And that was that here was a man accepting his brokenness. He had shame over his brokenness, as we should.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, he was capable of repentance, recovery, and moving forward. And so just like we are together with broken people and whole people, people who are sleeping in boxes on the street, and people who are sleeping in billion-dollar high-rises, and just like in our own life, there are parts of us that are jealous and angry, and also parts that are kind and good. The truth of this is that every part of the story had to happen, because every part of the story has a deeper meaning. And the deeper meaning is God needed us to have broken tablets more than God needed us to have whole tablets.
Good. So let's see that inside for a moment, okay? Let's substantiate that. That's in chapter 33. So look at chapter 33. It's a wonderful, thank you. It's on page 536, right? So the people who promulgated the golden calf, and it's all of the craziness are punished, except for Aaron. That's another story. And now, here's the aftermath. The great stories are always written, what happened next? What happened next? How do you get past the crisis? How do you go, what happens next? Bruce.
You slid right past Aaron.
I did. At the end. Let me go through this, and I promise you I will do Aaron before we leave. It's a quiet morning. There's no bar mitzvah. It's raining outside. We're going to be here all morning. Don't worry about it. Fourth quarter, we'll get to Aaron. God says to Moshe, time to move on. Anyone here ever have a fight with your spouse? And then you sort of make up and both of you decide, I'm not completely satisfied, but it's time to move on? Anyone ever lose a job and have to go out back and find a new job, and you sit down at the desk in the new place and say, time to move on? Anyone ever get rooked in a business deal, get screwed in a business deal, and you have to move? After something bad happens to you, see, in the movies, that's when they roll the credits and the thing's over. And those of us who were raised on cinema have this idea that, life is episodic. But in real life, there's a tomorrow. Right? I go to a funeral service for a dear friend, and I try to imagine what it's going to be like for the spouse or the family to wake up in the morning, and you have to move on. So God says, okay, time to move on. Only one thing, right? Look on 537, right? Verse 2, I will send an angel before you and drive out all the bad guys. Since you are a stiff-necked people, lest I destroy you on the way. When the people heard this, they went into mourning, right? God says again, now this is a badly edited text, which means it's trying to impose a sense of chaos, right? The Lord said to Moses, you're a stiff-necked people. If I were to go in your midst one moment, I would destroy you. So leave off your finery and I'll consider it. So you're a stiff-necked people, and I can't be with you because I'm a perfect God. And a perfect God can't lead a broken people. A perfect God can't lead a broken people. I can't be with you. I'll lose my temper and kill you all. I mean, Moses stopped me before, but just in the nick of time. If Moses hadn't been there or he'd been in a bad mood, you'd all be dead. You can't live with me. You see the problem here? So Moses, there's this whole episode where Moses takes the tent, the whole Mishkan, and puts it on the outside of the camp. Now turn to page 538. This is going to come to something, I promise you. Look at verse 12. Moses said to God, you say to me, lead this people forward. But you've not made known to me who you're going to send. And you said, I've singled you out by name and gained my favor. Now, if I've truly gained your favor, pray, let me know your ways, that I may know you and continue in your favor. And remember that this is your people. So there's two questions being asked here. Two issues being negotiated at the same time. And the editors of the story smushed them together badly. One is, who's going to lead this people if you're not coming with us? And the other is, who are you? Or rather, who do you want to be? Now watch how these two themes are intertwined together, right? This is, by the way, parenthood is, of course, the best example of divinity. So if you've ever really gotten mad at your kid, right, and almost hit them, right? And yeah, almost. No. There have been times when I just wanted to whack the kid, and you walk out in the backyard and you say, get the kid out of my sight, because the next time I'm going to hit him. I mean, you just lose. This is God losing it, right? What happens, right? God says, I'll go in the lead. And he says to him, unless you go in the lead, do not make us leave this place. For how shall it be known that people have gained your favor unless you go with us, so that we may be distinguished, your people and I, from every people on the face of the earth? What does Moses say? You don't lead us, we don't move. This is the first sit-down strike in the history of the world. This is a sit-down strike. The whole 602,000 people sit down and they say, screw this. You don't lead us, we'll stay right here till you change your mind. We're not moving. Now, God has a problem. God's problem is, I can't be with them, but if I don't go with them, they're not moving. Right? They're demanding. So what does God have to do? Turns out God has to move. Well, here's what happens, right? Right? Now, we flip to the other theme. The Lord said to Moses, I'll do what you told me. for you've truly gained my favor. I've singled you out. And he said, Hareini et kvodecha. Let me know you. Hareini et kvodecha. Show me your presence. Show me your glory. Moses wants intimacy with God. He wants closeness to God. He wants to understand God. He says, I'll make my goodness pass before you. I'll proclaim. It's a very strange thing. You cannot see my face. For man cannot see my face and live. I'll put you in a rock. I'll pass by. You'll see my back. Very strange thing. Strange story. Here's what I want you to do. Put a finger right here on this story and turn with me back to Exodus 20, which is the Ten Commandments. Okay? Turn to page 442. Put a finger here on 541 and turn to 442. We need to look at both texts at the same time. When God showed up on Mount Sinai and revealed God's self to the people, what did he say about himself? Listen to what he says about himself. 442. Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I am the Lord your God. Asher hotziticha me'eretz Mitzrayim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, mibeit avadim, from the place of slavery. Lo yelecha, right? Elohim achirim. You'll not bow down to any other God, right? You'll not make for yourself sculptured objects that look like me. Look at the end of that verse, right? Verse 5. See it? For I, the Lord your God, am El Kana. It says here, impassioned God. That's a bad translation. Impassioned God. Jealous God. I don't have room for anybody to tell me I'm wrong. Anybody know people like that? If you tell them they're wrong, even if it's empirically obvious that they're wrong, they'll whack you. El Kana, I'm rigid. I get pissed off real easy. El Kana, how Kana am I? How rigid am I? Pokain avon avot al banim al shlishim v'reveim l'sonai. I whack families for 4 generations. Right? I'm pretty nice to the people who like me, but don't cross me. Right? Don't cross me. I am mean. I am tough. I am rigid. I don't change. I don't have a lot of room for forgiveness in me. Now watch what happens here. Keep your finger here. Go back to our page, right? Look at 541. There's all these different narrative streams being edited together in the story, but you can separate them into the story. So Moses climbs up the mountain and waits for God to pass by. And the Torah strategically doesn't tell us what he saw. Because what he saw, you have to be Moses to see. But it tells us what he learned. And what did he learn? Verse 5. The Lord came down in a cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. In other words, he perceived the essence of God. And what's the essence of God? Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Vechanun. No, before he was El Kana, which means tough, hard-ass, rigid God, to use an American idiom. Now he's Chanun Verachum. What is Chanun Verachum? Softy, compassionate, bleeding heart, liberal God. Loving God. He didn't introduce himself as El Chanun Verachum on Mount Sinai. He introduced himself as El Kana. Now he's El Rachum Vechanun. I'm a loving God. Rachum is a motherly term. Right? Your father disciplines you different than your mother. Or better, my teacher David Hartman said, it's the difference between your mother and your mother-in-law. Right? Your mother-in-law will tell you everything's wrong with you. Your mother will tell you everything's wrong with you, but she'll hug you while she's doing it, right? Right? My mother-in-law is just as loving as my mother. So, but this is, right? El Chanun V'Rachum. Different. Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed V'Emet. We didn't hear that before either. Erech Apayim, patient. Patient God. Rav Chesed. What's a Rav Chesed? Chesed means selfless love. Ve'emet, truth. Notzer Chesed la'alafim. Now, before it said, Look at the Ten Commandments back in 444. First he says, I hold grudges for 4 generations, but I reward my friends for 1,000. Now the order of those two is reversed. Now he says, Notzer chesed la'alafim, I reward loyalty for thousands generations. Right? Right? No say avon vefesha vechatat. No say avon vefesha means I'm willing to tolerate bad behavior. I carry it. I can absorb it, right? V'nakeh lo yinakeh. Now, it's an interesting phrase. Nakeh lo yinakeh literally means, but I never forgive. But the rabbis of the tradition split that phrase. And every rabbi, the Rashi and all the Midrashim split that phrase. And nakeh lo yinakeh means, for those who do repentance, nakeh. And for those who don't repent, lo yinakeh. Now, that's not what the Bible says, right? But that's how the tradition read it. Because they wanted to see no se avon v'fesha. No se avon v'fesha means I'm willing to tolerate brokenness. That's what Rabbi Gelman just spoke about, right? Now he gives you the same idea that he holds grudges for 4 generations. But that's only after he tells you no se avon avot. Now, it's not a perfectly loving God. I get it. But there's a big difference between this God and the one we met at Mount Sinai. Or rather, this God and the one we found in the Ten Commandments. The difference is what Rabbi Gelman spoke about so lovely, so beautifully. This is a God who says, I get it. You're not whole. You'll never be whole. I have to learn to live with your shortcomings, with your brokenness. We have to learn to live together. I have to learn to live with the fact that you're in process, that you're becoming, that you're not finished yet. El rachum v'chanun, el kana. The difference between those two phrases is decisive. This is the first time in the Torah mercy is attributed to God. And it's only after the crisis of the golden calf. Meaning, what do we get here? A different theology, a different vision of divinity, a different way of the world, a different ideal for human life. You want to live with people? You can't be El Kana. You can't be that hard-ass, demanding perfection all the time. You want to ruin children? Ask for perfection. Right? My dear friend Mark Borowitz runs Beit Shuvah. Right? He'll tell you the principal cause of addiction is perfectionism. Every kid who's told he's got to be perfect and can't be runs away to drugs.
Or demands of himself.
Or demands, but that someone taught him. That you're only worthy of love if you're perfect. Here you have a God who says, I'm going to love you even though you're broken. No se avon avot. And no se avon v'fesha. I know you're broken. I know you're broken. I can live with that. Just put yourself on the path to righteousness. It's a very different God. And so what's happened here is we have a renegotiation of the theology of the book, a renegotiation of God's nature, a renegotiation of the covenant between the Jewish people and God. And a God who's now willing to say, I can live with your brokenness. I can live with your brokenness. And now what's going to happen is, you're going to need a set of rituals that now take into consideration your brokenness. And that's what's going to come soon next. A whole set of expiation rituals. The whole idea of tshuva. What is tshuva? What is tshuva? You don't have to be perfect. You just have to recognize when you screw up. It's returning. But what's the promise of tshuva? If you return, the door's unlocked. Right? Parent says to the kid, come home, the door's unlocked. Come home. I don't care what you did. As long as you come home, the door's unlocked. Right? That's an amazing idea. Right? It's an amazing, amazing idea. That's what's hinted at here. It's going to be expanded later on in the Torah. So Rabbi Gelman's idea that the broken tablets are necessary because now we have a different idea of what divinity is. A divinity that's willing to tolerate and welcome and embrace human brokenness and not reject us. It's a very different idea of love and the humility And the humility that goes, the Billy Graham story is a beautiful story. The humility to say, I get it. Okay, a bunch of it. Molly.
But wait.
Wait, hang on a second. Wait.
One thing I
Go
just have to say.
All right.
What I
You're
said-
next.
What I said was beautiful. You were right.
You're right.
But what I said was incomplete,
I know.
and it needed what you just said.
Yeah.
This was very high Torah on your part.
Thank you. Very kind.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Sure.
Molly. Molly, please.
You're saying that he's David in a way,
Yeah.
but then he kills them.
He killed them first. He killed the guys that promulgated. Now, here's the truth. He still has temper tantrums. Right? He still has temper tantrums, right? The parent who says, all right, I get it. She's a teenager. He's a teenager. I shouldn't get angry. I still get angry. You come back at 1:30 in the morning smelling of God knows what. I'm still going to get pissed at you. I'm not going to throw you out of the house.
But they killed them.
They killed,
Doesn't punish them. He kills them.
not all of them. He kills 3,000 of them.
That's a lot.
No, there's 2.5 million. They're expendable. No. God forbid. God forbid. God forbid. God forbid. He's still. But your point is very important. As you read the rest of the Torah, you say, "Oh, he's now a forgiving God, a loving God," and he keeps getting mad. Why? Because I promise. Because he's growing too. This is a dynamic divinity, a God that's trying to figure out how do you live with broken people. How do you raise teenagers? Are you a teenager? God forbid you. I hope your parents are better than me. How do you live with teenagers? They're still going to things, and you're going to get angry, but you don't raise the fist. You don't. Yeah, you're right. There's still a lot of rage here. There's a lot of violence here, right? Douglas, and then Ron, and we'll come around.
When you get to the prayer book,
Yeah.
they cut out low unit.
Yeah, no, that's one of the worst editing jobs. Because so the phrase is nakeh lo yanakeh. In biblical Hebrew, when you put a verb, the word lo, and that verb again, it means extra strong. Like never, right? Super strong, right. If you put two verbs together, like in Genesis, it's a chol tochal, which means you really got to eat, right? Lech lecha, you really got to go. Nakeh lo yanakeh means you're really not going to hold you innocent. But the rabbis of the tradition did something very suspect, but it was important for them theologically, even though it was suspect grammatically. They divided the phrase into two. They said, nakeh, period. Lo yanakeh, like that. They divided the phrase. So grammatically, it's egregious. But philosophically, it makes a lot of sense that you're willing to forgive under certain circumstances. You don't forgive under other circumstances. There's no unforgivable acts to the person who really does tshuva. That's what they're trying to say. That tshuva really is a door unlocked for the one who wants to come home. Okay? Okay, Ron.
Does Rabbi Gelman mean that the broken pieces represent the people?
Yeah. The brokenness of the people. Our sinfulness, right? It's all the stuff we do which we shouldn't be doing. It's the broken law, right? Because what are the pieces? It's pieces of the law. We break the law. We break the rules. We push the boundaries. We violate the limits, right? We sin. And if we lived in a world with a God who says, every time you sin, I'm going to whack you, it'd be a very unfortunate world. In the same way that a child who lives with a parent who says, if you do that, I'm not going to love you. The parent who demands perfection of the child destroys the child. And the God who demands perfection of his people can't live in the same world with his people. But a God who's willing to change, and the symbol of the broken tablets, as the rabbi said, is a symbol of the change. A God who's willing to say, all right, I get it. You're still in progress. You're still in process. There has to be room for this here. That's what it means. Does that make sense? Yeah, good. Someone else? Yes, please.
Page 539, verse 19.
Yeah.
It says, meaning, that I'm only going to show you my goodness.
Yeah.
I think it's a way to please Moses.
You think she's buying Moses off?
On his
Yeah. Okay, it could be. It could be. I think that what's going on, this is a very strange chapter, I have to say. It's badly edited. And as I've told you before, when I read stuff, when the Bible wants to tell a story with clarity and power, it knows how to do it. So when I read a section like this where the topic keeps switching, the speakers keep switching, the words are odd, I say to myself, why would they do that? I think it's on purpose. I think that it's trying to show you that they're grasping for an idea that they don't have a full hold on yet. This idea, and because think about what they're saying. All of us, look, it's a human thing, not just a godly thing. What does it mean to say, I'm willing to accept the brokenness of the other? That's such a powerful statement, right? You know, how many times in a marriage, how many times in a family, how many times in a community do we struggle to accept the shortcomings of the other, right? The brokenness of the other, right? There's some things that just tick me off, and it takes such not to get mad. You know, I got mad at somebody in the parking lot the other day. And you know, and as I'm walking by, I saw myself in my own rearview mirror, and I said, "Schmuck, you're the rabbi. You know, you're going to create an anti-Semite here." I mean, like, so somebody took your parking space. It wasn't even that they took my parking space. They parked between two parking spaces. They took my parking space and the one next to it. And it was cold, and I was tired, and I was in a hurry. And if it was one of you, God help you, you know? Because the Lord may be no se'avon v'fesha, but I'm not. So, you know, it's just, you just like, yeah. You know that feeling? I'm just trying so hard to reach my better parts of me and not be ruled by my shortcomings and my own shortcomings and my own lack of patience and my own vengeance and my own, you know, that's why they took the laser beams off my car. Because there'd be a lot of dead people in LA, boy. You cut me off in traffic, I hit that red button, you get hit with a photon torpedo, you know. That's why they had to take the phaser guns off my automobile. It's just, you know, I think what the Torah is trying to do is struggle to this idea of God, a different idea of God. It's easy to imagine a God who is perfect, who demands perfection, who gets angry at a people that's not perfect. It's much harder to imagine a God who, like us, is willing to say, you're growing, I get it, I'll give you room. You don't have to be perfect, I love you anyway. And I think that's what the roughness of the narrative is trying to reach toward, right? Yes, please.
If we are theoretically an image of God, formed in God's image.
Yeah, whatever that means.
And whatever that means is right.
Right.
And if we accept that God made a mistake and gave us free will.
I don't know if it's a mistake, but okay.
He gave us free will. Why is he so surprised? Why is he having such a difficult time?
That's a beautiful question. That is such a beautiful question. Why is he so surprised? Right? It's what? Especially slaves, right? I think it's a beautiful question. Right? It's why am I surprised when my teenage child screws off? I was once a teenager, right? You know? I once said to a boy, if you do to my daughter what I did to her mother, I'll kill you, you know? I mean, why are we so surprised? Because you impose a dream. I carry a dream of my child into the world.
No, but you're not divine.
I know, but I'm as close to, I can only use my own experience. Because the God of the Bible is not omniscient. That's an Aristotelian idea. The God of the Bible is growing. He's dynamic. And he reflects our experience. This is a human text reflecting on divinity. And the human experience is, if you expect perfection of people, you're going to either walk around pissed off or angry or disappointed all the time. You have to learn to live with human imperfection. And you have to have enough love to leave the door open every night so that the kid can come back in and say, oh man, did I do the wrong thing? I think that's what's being reflected here, right? The kids in school always ask me, I do questions and answers to the kids in school, and the kids always ask me, if God knew that people were going to be so sinful and broken, and God knew that people were going to do such bad, evil, terrible things, why did God create people? It's a beautiful question. And the answer came to me really quickly, and it got me in trouble, though. I said to the kid, here's what I want you to do. Go home and ask your parents why they had you. Because I got news for you. Before you were born, they had a really good life. They could watch what they wanted on TV. They could walk around the house in their gatkes. They could eat when they wanted to and what they wanted, go out when they wanted. And then you came in the world. You remember your first word? The very first syllable you uttered to your loving parents. You emerged into the world. You took your first breath, looked into your mother's eyes and screamed, ah! And you didn't stop screaming for the next, 35 years, So the kid comes back the next week. I asked the whole group, and the kids come in. Some kid raised his hand and said, I don't know. I asked my mom, and she said, go ask your dad. And I asked my dad, and he said it had to do with a bottle of California Chardonnay. Rabbi, what's Chardonnay? That's just the funniest answer I've ever heard, right? Yeah, but some mother sat the kid down at bedtime and she said, I wanted someone to love. I mean, that's the question. Why do you create a creature that has the power to disobey? Because only with free will can I love. If we were automatons, if we were like animals are built with instinct, then loyalty and love would mean nothing because it would be instinctual. The idea that loyalty and love is chosen makes it meaningful. That's the idea. But that's the trap. The same free will that allows you to express loyalty and love and make it meaningful means you can go the other way. You can build golden calves, or nuclear weapons, or AR-15s. I mean, the same idea, right?
There's love in animals also. If you ever watch a mother bear and her cubs, don't get close to those cubs.
Yeah, no, I try not to. No, I know that, but I think there's something else there. It's a different kind of love. It's an instinctual kind of love, and this is, you're trying to, the idea of a deeply felt voluntary experience of loyalty and love. Yes, please.
I have a question, but I'm not quite sure how to formulate it. But when I read the small excerpt, maybe you'll understand. And the question is about the interplay between God and leaders. And here's what I mean. On page 547, on the relation of the Haftarah.
Yeah, what does he say?
It says
Professor Fishbane.
The apostasy
Just read the line. I'm listening to you.
of the people before the golden calf in the wilderness and the later worship of the Baals of the Lord both required the intercession of a leader to restore true worship. So therefore, the question is something to do with God and leader, but I'm not sure.
Right. Well, so what's happened here is that there's another whole theme which we haven't developed, which is Moses. And in the Haftarah, it's Elijah. Moses, who's stuck between God and the people. He's loyal to both. And his job is to balance the two. And Moses is the balancing factor. When God gets too angry and wants to destroy the people, he calms God down. When the people go astray, he punishes them and brings them closer to God. But the stress that puts on a leader is enormous. And the question is, where does he get the wherewithal to deal with that? Because it means ultimately that no one's watching out for him. Right? He's got to manage God, he's got to manage the people, and he's got to get them to Canaan at the same time. And where does the man find that kind of wherewithal? And any leader who does this, right? Any leader who says, the courage of leadership is to say, I'm involved with an ideal, and I'm going to bring my people along with the ideal, and I'm going to face all the resistance that my pursuit of the ideal might generate, because the ideal is that important to me. So the ferocious love he has for God and his people, and for this mission of liberating his people and bringing them to the promised land, is what drives him forward. But it means that he's going to be constantly battling on both sides. right? You constantly got a battle on both sides, okay? And then that's another sermon which we could get into about leaders who have the capacity to do that and leaders who don't, right? Yes.
I think the part where God it says, you can't look at my face, you can only look at my back.
Yeah.
He summarizes this.
Interesting story, yeah.
If you look at my face, you're seeing the absolute God.
Right.
And you know God, and you can't do that in the real world. But what you see is after I pass, you see the weight that's fragmented.
Right.
And that's how I will appear to you in the real world and not the metaphysical.
It's a very, very nice point of view. And it's echoed in the commentaries and the traditions and especially in the philosophers. That you can't see God head on, but you can see the effects of divinity in the world. Right? When kids ask me this question, I always divert them. Talk about love, not God. You can't see love, but I can see what love does. Right? I see a mother and a child. I see a teacher and a student. I see friends. I see partners. I see what love does. You can't see love, but you can see its effect in the world. The idea of God's back, meaning the wake, as you said, it's a nice way of phrase, the wave pattern of divinity moving through the world, right? That's one of the interpretations of that particular very strange idea. You can't see my front, you can see my back. And you'll find this through the Torah. They're struggling with this idea of, because they came out of Egypt where you can see God. The Sphinx is a god, right? The obelisks are gods. Show me something I can see, That's what the Torah is, that's what an Egyptian raised Jew is saying, and the Torah keeps saying, you can't. This is a different kind of God. It's a different kind of experience of divinity. All right, I'm losing my voice, so I think it's a good time to make Shabbos. Next week, my colleague, Rabbi Farkas, will be here. I'll be back the following week. Have a wonderful Shabbat. Stay warm, and be careful out there.
FYI, George M. Cohen.
George M. Cohen. But it was a grand old rag. That's what the original...
Irish, though, instead of Jewish. Berlin wrote God Bless America.